Hi, this is Alan Gassman. Thanks for checking in today. I hope you're having a great Sunday. I'm here with two old friends, and I mean friends for many years, not that they're old. One is Hiram Hazely, who I've been working with to set up a community band in the St. Petersburg, Florida area for people quite worthy of having the opportunity to play in a band with professional guidance and with recognition for great practice in musicianship. And then we also have Chuck Dollenbach, who has been for many years known as the funniest and best tuba player in the world, next to Tubby Tuba. Now, Tubby Tuba probably is a bit more famous and maybe more talented. But Chuck is with the Canadian Brass and got a PhD in music in the 1970s, and then continues just to thrive in the musical area. Most of our attendees today, Chuck and Hiram, are probably CPAs and tax lawyers who follow us on our charitable talks on the technical area of charity. But what we wanted to talk about today is what people can actually do with foundations and private foundations and public charities to help anyone with anything. And the two of you are really good examples of people who have taken your professional lives and your personal lives and the lives of young musicians to help them, because we know what comes around goes around. And Chuck, Hiram, and I have never done this before. Hiram is a band leader in St. Pete, Florida. He's got a rhythm and blues band. Before that, he was with the band. I sent you the CD years ago. It was Rocky Ruckman and the Beat Heathens, and you said you were going to steal some of their stuff. I don't know if you ever did that, but Hiram was their bass player. And Hiram's been teaching piano lessons for underprivileged children for our foundation now for what, Hiram, about 15 years?
Yes.
Hundreds and hundreds of lessons. So Hiram was also in the marching band at Busch Gardens, which I hadn't realized it when I went there, but that was a really good band.
Right.
And a very well-respected band. So, you know, we've pulled together a program. We advertised, we have a Facebook page, we have a website, and we have musicians now. So Hiram, you want to just give Chuck a little bit of an overview of where we are and what we're thinking?
Sure. How you doing, Chuck?
Really good.
Pleasure. We managed to put together a 9-piece marching band consisting of a drum major, a fill drummer in the form of a snare, a fill bass drummer, 2 trombones, 3 trumpets. And we've got a distinguished music director, Desmond Boone, who was actually the music director of one of the theme parks in Tampa for years. It came from that FAMU, that marching FAMU band, Florida A&M. So with his tutorship and his leadership, the group is really coming together, and he's actually teaching them to play and dance while they're playing. So that's going to be very interesting to see it all come together. We've been trying to work with the younger musicians that are like in need and could use the help financially, you know. Otherwise, people can get all kind of things if you don't have something to do with your time. So we're looking forward to seeing how this is going to work. And we've got Lindsay Gassman from University of Florida. She's a musician as well, clarinet player, and she has a lot of her friends mentoring some of the musicians in this band. You know, the cats have a problem with some phrases, whatever. He contacts Lindsay, and she contacts one of the mentors and makes the connection. And before you know it, all ends are mended. So that's what we have so far, and we're working on it. We're looking forward to some really good things.
And that sounds terrific. And what's really nice about that is that you're taking you're taking a format that really allows for that kind of musical enterprise, making it more into a show than just a static. A lot of us who came out of classical music colleges, everything was very static back in the day. And I think we changed that in our own way a lot. And it sounds like what you're doing is right in line with that same thing. By the way, I think my family, we had season's tickets to Busch Gardens for a while, back in the day when we were down in Florida.
Okay.
So is it possible I saw you performing?
Possible.
That would have been great. Should have tripped you right then.
What did you think of that band, Chuck? You saw them a few times.
Well, I think you have very strict rules when you're there, and it's very, very professional and really up and positive. And I think that's what really comes across when you're in the park, is that positive nature. And obviously, that's what the owners of Busch Gardens would want. They want you to feel great. So I'm sure that that's part of the mandate, is to play music that's uplifting and present yourself in a really positive manner.
Exactly. We worked on a lot of showmanship, because a lot of musicians tend to have a real bland face when they're not performing, not playing it, and that feel like the spotlight is on them.
Yep.
So we had to pretty much like acting in a way. You have to focus on keeping a facial attitude.
Oh, you're right on, because that's exactly something we've talked about a lot in our group, because that is a possibility that you can just be counting out your bars of breath. And that once you're in front of an audience, you are in front of the audience, you're performing, and it doesn't matter. It's just as important. There's a really wonderful, great opera singer back in the day, Cecilia Bartoli. And there's a moment when she's just waiting for her entrance, and normally you'd just watch the orchestra, and the camera watched her, and you're riveted to her as a performer, even when she's not singing. She's there for, she's there with you. She's somehow made that connection. And I think that's what you're talking about. You need that connection. And that's what, if you can bring that to young players, they can use that in every endeavor they're in. Because I think, Alan, I'm sure you've sat around many meetings where people look pretty dour and pretty disconnected. And it's the same thing. I mean, when you're there, you're really there, you're connected, and you're part of and you can tell who's in and who's not.
It's a show, it's a show. You don't want to be on stage looking at the audience. You want the audience looking at you and give them something to see. So I agree totally.
Mm-hmm. Alan, I think I've gotten in trouble a few times when you're in a legal situation of any nature. You have to be very careful what you say, because whoever's in charge has to listen to every word, and sometimes it just it warrants a funny joke or a line, and then suddenly you're into an hour of explaining. No, I didn't really mean that. What I was trying to say.
Yeah, Chuck, you have such great monologues and dialogues about music when you're on stage. That's such funny stuff. Do things just slip out of your mouth? And
Constantly. Constantly. Well, that's another thing, Hiram, and you probably know about this too, is that when we perform, we have time between pieces, and we always felt that was open territory. We're very serious about the music. We rehearse probably like a string quartet would rehearse so carefully. But we always felt that time between the pieces was open, and that there was an opportunity to explain a few things, and to maybe just make the listening experience a little more heightened, giving a few cues. And it may seem like it's humorous and it's funny, but the intention is to give little signposts, things to listen for, and just be a little more connected to that performance that's coming up.
Exactly. I've had the opportunity, I worked with a dance band and with that audience, and then I worked with a jazz group and that audience. And working with a friend of mine, I noticed that on the downtime between preparation for the next song, he would actually explain some musicology ideas. This particular tune was written by Thelonious Monk in Blase Blase, and it's a funny story behind it. And before you know it,
Mhm.
small monologue, letting everybody get that whole visual, and then you play straight no chaser. Well, in the dance scene, I usually pick somebody to connect with, where you from, and try to
Mhm.
get a quick response to those guys. And sometimes you hit and miss, but for the most part, you get an idea of how to keep them going and keep them jovial to the next tune.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And I think that it was supposed to be a sacred, quiet time between music. I know we got criticized in the early years for talking to the audience. People thought this was outrageous. Yet you can assume that just what you were saying, probably a huge percentage of your audience wouldn't even know the name Thelonious Monk. What does he do? What's he about?
Right.
Why keep that a secret? Why is it that musicians used to think, well, I know and they don't know, and they better find out? Well, here's your chance. And
Exactly.
it sounds like you're tuned into that nicely.
Exactly. The one thing I don't really appreciate, Chuck, is dead air. Dead air scares me because it's the attention span is real short with a lot of people that don't know live music.
Yep.
They're used to the radio, they're used to the jukebox.
Yeah,
when you have
great.
a live musician and it's dead time, that means I can go this way. I can go
Fantastic.
back. It's time to go. It's always stuff.
Alan, you've picked the right person. I mean, this is exactly right on. This is, you know where this is going to lead when he puts his young players together and they're learning their music and learning their performance. You're going to have a real nice result.
Well, thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, he's a great example. So Chuck,
Yeah.
let's go back. Let's go back to your childhood a little bit. When did you decide that music was going to be your thing? When did you really know that?
I don't think I ever had a choice. I'm seventh generation musician. So it's been in the family. My father was a band director, an orchestra director, and a choir director, sort of Mr. Holland's Opus kind of guy. So we had to sing in the church choir, of course, and we had to play in his band. And at one point, even played a little bit of cello, very, very little, but constantly playing, performing. And it's actually the way that I learned to play rather than, I was not a big practicer. I never practiced a lot. I can admit it now. When you mentioned old friend, I'm the old friend. I can admit this. Practice was not my forte because I learned everything by playing, by performing. And performance is really the ticket. My dad was a trombonist, and every night after dinner, he'd take out his horn and play, and I would just sit along, play along. So I was learning by playing next to him. He was my mentor, and he ran summer music program, summer band program, and every hour a different group would come in. There'd be seventh graders, and then the 10th graders, and the 12th graders, the great. And he let me sit there the whole day when I was, gosh, I think I was in 6th grade. And I would sit there the whole day and play with each of those groups. So I was already sitting next to high school kids when I was quite young. There's no better way to learn. And Hiram, I'm sure you're finding this too. If you put in a weaker player next to a strong player, there's very little you have to say. Just let them at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was a quote. I don't know if exactly I'd be fair to say a quote, but there was a word out on Miles Davis hiring so many good musicians when he had his performances. And I do the same with the jazz band. I'm new to jazz, although I've been playing it for years. I'm still a new jazz player. I study jazz. And with me having a stronger background in R&B, I jazz show, and I read the audience. If I see them getting too burnt out with the after a while, that becomes just like that. It's like, too much. I'm gonna go somewhere else. I'll put some dance in and have somebody play the melody and solo over it, Billie Jean, just to keep them into the mood.
Beautiful. And I think that's the key too, is not to get stuck in one genre, one style, just to keep people engaged.
Entertain.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Chuck, what do you see as the universal laws of helping young people become accomplished musicians? Because you guys do this in 200 cities a year. you show up and you don't just you guys just don't play a gig and go on. You always teach almost everywhere you go, right? Can you talk about that a little bit, about of the brass?
First, let's get this straight. You said laws. Now, why is it that word came up in your laws? Actually, we do spend a lot of time with younger players. And one of the things that we stress is not to copy us directly, but copy our intention. And our intention was to always keep our ears open and our eyes open to what people, what audiences, what a granting concern, maybe Alan, what you're interested in. Someone that wants to get next to Alan and your friends, they better find out what you're interested in and what you would like to support and what you'd like to back. And I think too often musicians go in with the idea that I'm a great musician and I want to tell you something. And you think, no, if you're a great musician, then you're ready to listen and to adapt to that and take that talent to somebody and use it in some really productive manner. I think that's the key. I think if there's one law, it's that: keep your eyes and ears open.
Chuck, what about, you're just a superstar 16-year-old, you're going to be as good as any trumpet player ever born. Should they stay in school, or should they just get a GED and school won't help them? And this is coming from a PhD, of course.
Well, there's a Hiram, you probably could back this up. The higher degree you have, the more it indicates how long it took you to get a job. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say that not being in school and music being such a hard job to get full time, to get benefits and get all the gratuities that go with a normal job, quote unquote, it's better to stay in school until they become more difficult jobs. I was in school, I was in college I was on my 5th year of college when the Steam Hard gig opened up. And when it opened up, I stopped school and went to work because that was like gold.
Yeah.
Benefits, 401k, and then it's
oh, now you're talking my language. Oh no, Alan's language. I thought it was my language there for a minute. 401k. Yeah. Well, the idea of going to school, we encourage kids now, young players, young students, to make sure they have a minor, make sure that they're taking something besides music, because music is a skill. And there is an esoteric philosophical side of it. You can study the masters and you can develop the history and concepts and so forth, but that's secondary. Performing is one thing, and now what else? And the best is many students now are realizing that a business degree, or at least sitting in on a lot of business courses, can be really, really helpful once they do have that job. Because a lot of us, if you take a typical music school, the percentage that come out and actually get a job that includes things like pensions and all that is very slim. So a lot of musicians are on their own and need, I guess they need help to figure these things out. And one of the things that can be helpful are courses such as this. I know, Alan, I think you told me years ago, you should have gone to business school. I think that was you that told me that. Didn't you say that?
That I should have gone to business school?
No,
You're a very good business person.
Very small steps.
Let's talk about the business of music. That's a tough. I mean, restaurants are really, really tough, and music is a really tough, challenging business, isn't it?
It is.
And it just got harder in the internet era. It got a little more difficult. It's still the same. You're making music and you're figuring out how to package that music and how to deliver that music. But the delivery system has changed so radically. And it was a strong enough change already before the COVID era, where we can't even perform publicly. This is an interesting time. We were fortunate, our group, that we have a brand. Canadian Brass is known pretty much with musicians worldwide. So things that we do will get listened to or will get seen or picked up at some level. So for us, the internet era opened up a bigger audience for us. It meant that people in Africa, we're looking at our statistics. We have this big following in Africa. We've never been invited to play in Africa, but we have fans all over Africa. Same with South America. We've only been down, I think we were in Argentina once, and Mexico maybe 2 tours. And again, it's one of our strongest. Our strongest is the United States. That's where we have most of our fans. Second, you'd think it'd be Canada, right? No, Germany, and then Italy, South America. And so it goes. And so we feel this is really a wonderful way to get your music out and heard. But on the business side of it, it's not a way to make a living, because the chances that it'll be known that somebody's listening to your music is very slim. And then if even somebody does listen to your music, as you probably well know, Alan, your payment for one person listening to one piece is something like 0.0000, I think it's 401 cent. So you better have more than one person listening to your music, maybe more than 100, maybe more than 1 million. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And Hiram, I would imagine this is a big challenge right now too. What do you do publicly? What do you do?
I'm listening to you, and I'm just trying to grab onto every word you're saying, because that's my concern with USB. I want to make sure that we are known, we're visible.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing at a time. Of course, we got to get this thing till it's up and running, but I want to get it up. I want to get it running. I want to get it known. I want to get it requested, and these kind of things. The kind of things that's going to make us, hopefully go to another level.
And that's exactly right. What you're doing, you're putting together a program. I'm assuming that people will be really intrigued and interested, and they'll talk about it. And word of mouth is the absolute best advertising. Word of mouth, and your community starts getting bigger and bigger, and you become known. And then they start searching you out on YouTube and so forth, and then life's great.
Are you currently using an agent?
Yes, we have an agency in New York that has slimmed down in this era. Our schedule absolutely wiped clean. We played one concert in Michigan in November. They took a deep breath and brought us in. And we have one in Jacksonville coming up in March. So we'll be in Florida. That's our year. We used to do 100 concerts a year. So it's quite different.
I can
So
imagine.
could be able to wait tables or have a minor in accounting so that you can do some work when gigs are slow. Right. Chuck, how about the selection of an instrument? How does that work for a young musician?
Well, there's lots of great instruments around now. We work with the Selmer company, which is in Indiana. And that's a company that goes back 120 years, I think, at least. American-made horns, really nice quality instruments, and they're not that expensive. The interesting thing about brass instruments, fortunately, unless you're trying to get rich, they never, the cost didn't follow the trend of the dollar. So you can get a fully professional trumpet, absolutely first-class trumpet, brand new, in the $2,000 range. Compare that to a violins, where you used to be able to get a really extraordinary violin for $20,000. Well, now it's probably $400,000.
Oh my!
Think how lucky we are to just. And if you go on YouTube, you can find a used, say a Bach trumpet, a used Bach trumpet. You might pay $6,000-8,000 for an instrument you could take right into Hiram's band professionally. So we're fortunate in that respect. That kids can get really quality instruments. It's really important to avoid the really, really cheap instruments, because you think, well, they're just starting, just get them an instrument made out of paper or something. you know, it seems like it's the youngest students that should have the best instrument. Professionals can play anything. By the time you've played for 20, 30 years, you could probably play a garden hose. But when you're just starting out, that's when it'd be really nice to have a quality instrument. And the thing is that if one is really careful and does their homework, you can find really good instruments at reasonable prices. And there's some really fine repairmen that can refurbish an instrument really quickly. So I hope that's what you're finding, Hiram, that you're finding good quality instruments and not breaking the bank.
I'm trying my best, and I'm running it by people like you for your opinion, because you know, tubas and stuff like that. I'm not really familiar with the best move or the best route to go. So any ideas you can offer would be great.
Well, you have to be careful with sousaphones. I read an article recently that it used to be the most stolen brass instrument would be a trumpet. Second was trombone. But now apparently it's sousaphone because of this whole La Banda movement. And you see it on Tonight Show Band, they're playing a sousaphone now instead of a tuba. So guard those sousaphones. They can get swiped really easy. I used to say the best insurance policy for my tuba was putting it next to a trumpet. Now I'm not so sure. You have to be careful.
Yeah, amazing. So Chuck, one of the things we're doing, I think that's a little bit different, is that we're actually paying the musicians so that they get a sense of, wow, you know, if I show up, I get paid.
Man, that's great. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess, Hiram, I'm available.
Come on down.
That's really great, because that'll give them a sense of reward and encouragement for sure. That's amazing.
Well, you know, one of the music schools that I support locally here where we live, I go in there, and quite honestly, it's like a bunch of rich little white kids and a bunch of Mercedes parked outside with their parents. They pick them up. I'm like, well, where are all the other kids? Well, they couldn't afford to get here. Their parents have jobs and can't bring them here.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to get a family to, you know, dedicate its resources to bring a child to a practice? Well, you know, pay them. That's just a fact of life, I think.
Fantastic. We're concerned, one of the things that's concerned us for years is that when you're in a junior high band, a high school band, these are diverse organizations. It's a good reflection of the community. And when we're playing our concerts in the typical concert 2,000 seat concert hall, it's not a diverse audience. And we're just wondering what it is. Why is there that drop off? And I love the idea that we're starting to see organizations. One is for older people, the New Horizons Band, which invites people who have maybe at the end of their career or finished their career to get their instruments back out of the closet and come to a rehearsal and come to a band and play again. And we're worried about that period between high school and New Horizons. Where are all these musicians? They don't have places to play. And it's not necessarily their fault. It just hasn't been. We've lost the town band tradition that we had in North America. And it seems to me that's, Hiram, I think you're right on it, as you're going right after the young kids. And this will be something, this will set them on a course for life. And it's compatible with jobs. You know, like music should always be, we don't encourage people to become professional musicians, but we encourage them to always be musicians, to always, you know, sing in a choir, hold on to an instrument, you know, make sure to do that.
Exactly.
Chuck, talk a little bit about the town band. You were giving me a little bit of the history the other day. I had never heard it. It was brand new to me, so I think it's interesting.
Well, I think it sort of came out of Europe, because Europe didn't necessarily have school music like we have these school music, public school music. They didn't have that. It was usually family music, and pastime was just something that families got involved with. And factory bands in England are still a big deal. You'd have the famous names, the Black Dyke Band, and they still have competitions with these amazing bands, and they're all amateur. They're amateurs that play better than than a lot of professionals. It was just amazing. This was happening in North America from the late 1800s. Sousa Band was a good example of the professional side of that. Sousa Band was as popular as a pop group, a rock and roller group would be now. Sousa was absolutely a superstar. And every town had its own band, and they would actually vie for the finest trumpet soloists. They'd actually go out looking for the people that could stand out in front and really wow a crowd. And they'd often have a singer as well, a singer or two. And I think that that also got into a lot of the jazz bands, where you'd have singers back in the 30s and 40s, like a Frank Sinatra. They just kind of sat at the side and they came forward to sing their solo, and then they'd go back and sit down. Well, you see how much that's changed. Now it's the singer and the band is somewhere in the back. But at any rate, this band tradition kept, it gave people something to do besides. They'd be colleagues in their factory or their job, and then they would have their nightly rehearsals, and then they'd perform for the communities. So that was a fantastic tradition. There were horn makers producing instruments all over the country. This was a very active profession. And at one time, there were major companies that we would consider now world-class companies. At one time, there was the Kahn company I mentioned, Bach, Busher in Indiana, Holton, York in Michigan. These were the big companies that were they'd have 300 or 400 employees working. And then you had right down to the single shop guys. Somebody would be a specialist in French horns or specialist in trumpets and so forth. And that's pretty well evaporated at this point. And a lot of the manufacturing has gone to China, as we know. They seem to be able to make a pretty decent similar instrument to just about anything we've seen from anywhere else in the world. So now it's a little harder to be an independent horn maker.
Yeah. Hiram, what other challenges are we having?
Well, the biggest thing right now is memorizing music. So far as USB, getting this different style of music down. Desmond has a really unique way of approaching small groups and the arrangements and the different positions that they put the music, the horns in. Sometimes you're playing a part with tuba on the trumpet. Sometimes that third trumpet is playing with the trombones. So it's a lot of different types of arrangements musically that he's using. And everybody remembering this style, like I said earlier, this style and approach is going to be the only hump. And then adding that to playing and moving. Moving is great by itself. Playing is excellent by itself. And you put the two together, it's a whole new day. It's like learning how to walk again. So that's going to be the biggest hump we have to cross right now.
Well, it sounds like, you've done a great job. You've got some really, really enthusiastic students. Everyone's showing up. The energy level is very, very high. My niece Lindsay, who plays in the University of Florida band, came and just said, wow, they have a lot more energy than we have. A lot more enthusiasm than we have. And they're a diverse group themselves from an age standpoint. The oldest is what, 24, 25? The youngest, what's the oldest and the youngest we have?
The youngest is 15.
Huh. Hiram, you said you have mentors coming in from the college and so forth?
Yeah, Lindsay's connection to you at University of Florida band. These guys are all offering their time to help these students out. especially with musical passages, you know, interpretation of some of the passages. So that's really good. And
And we know, don't we? They're going to be learning as much as the kids they're teaching.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that's exactly what should be happening. Alan, this is amazing that you're supporting an enterprise like this and getting people interested, because this is not a passive. This is not passive art. This is something that really, not only is it wonderful in its own sense, but it really enhances the community. It's got so much more sparkle. Impressive.
Yeah, thanks. You know, it happened because one of the local cities came to me and offered me a school building and said, you know, we've heard about your foundation, and if you could run a school here, we'll give you the whole darn building. And, you know, I called Hiram and we talked about it, and his passion was for this. You know, he said, you know, having one kid at a time come into a building is not going to be what this community and what these kids need. They need to play together as a band and learn, you know, how to do that. So, so now I don't have to worry about whether a building needs a roof and that thing too. Yeah.
See, musicians would be thinking, how could we turn that building into a condominium?
A timeshare, coffee shop.
Exactly.
Yeah, very true. Chuck, the technology since 1970s, can now every kid can afford their own studio? I mean, they can make their own music, they can mix it.
Oh boy, they're doing it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They are so far ahead of us older people that didn't have computers in our hands. The typical, like in my case, both my sons grew up on computer games and everything else. So when I have to record myself now in this era of COVID, I get my son to come in. He's he's been everything, a DJ and an engineer and a producer and so forth. He comes in and sets all the dials for me, and I take a picture of the dials, because when he's not here, what happens if somebody changes something? And I look at the picture and I put it back where he had it. But yeah, I think kids, it's a more enlightened age. I mean, we really are getting into you talk to kids, it's different. It really is changing. I think we're finally, you know, the age of enlightenment might be just around the corner. You know, everybody's a little distressed about, I don't know, social and political things. It could be that it's just getting outrageous because we're at the end of a cycle, because these young kids are just so far ahead. It just seems they're born more highly evolved. And and recording, I'm sure, Hiram, you just point at a kid and say, oh, play that back for me. They probably already have it on their phone, or some they've already been recording. So yeah, it's a short step now to get these kind of results.
Yeah.
Chuck, when we go to YouTube and maybe edit this a little bit, what are some favorite moments that we should look at?
Moments of what we just discussed. Let me review.
Yeah. In fact, I was looking at a video, I lost it, but I was looking at a video that you guys recently did where, I don't know, there was some sort of moderator with a microphone, and well, one of your members was talking about how the importance of the tradition of your band to teach music. Now, I thought that was, you know, really touching, and that your band is you and 4 other musicians who grew up listening to you. I thought that was so neat.
Right.
Yeah, it was just rubbing that in.
When we started, we had no idea if we could even, you know, get a few concerts on weekends. That was our intention, was pretty reasonable expectation. And of course, you climb a little hill and there's another hill in front of that. It's a little larger, and as it keeps going. So now kids that were born, for example, our French horn player was born either one year or the year that we started, he was born. So Canadian brass has always been in his environment. So it's like an institution, like we might think of the Bank of England has always been there. Who knows? somebody started that, and at that time it was brand new, and they wondered if it was going to work. But now it's just been there. So Canadian Brass looks like an institution of some nature, not to me, but to them apparently. And one of the things I've endeavored to do, I was a little concerned about, we started with the 4 guys, we were all about the same age. That means we were growing older at the same pace. And I was a little worried about that. And I started thinking, I've got to do something to get the average age down. So started hiring these younger players. And now average age of the group is quite reasonable.
Wow. Let me see if I can play a clip here and get your impressions of it. I'm gonna go to audio. Sorry that I'm not one of those whiz kids. Let me see here. Audio.
I think you're about to play The Flight of the Bumblebee, and that is an arrangement by Brandon Reidenauer. Brandon is one of our trumpet players and an extraordinarily talented writer as well as performer. His parents live in Sarasota.
Wow, they can come to be our band.
Well, they should. Actually, you should get him involved. His dad was a trumpet player at one time, but he's a professional pianist and conductor. And he's living in Sarasota. And his mother was a fine pianist as well, and she got into the business side. She became an orchestra manager up in Michigan. And then now she's affiliated with the Sarasota Opera Company. So yeah, you should be definitely twisting their arm.
Now, do you all have the same type instruments, same brand?
At that point, yes. Those were all the Bach and Kahn instruments.
That's
Bach
what I was thinking.
trombone, Kahn French horn, Bach trumpet. And the tuba is an amalgam. It's a carbon fiber. You're talking about fiberglass sousaphone.
Is it lighter?
Yeah, very much lighter. Carbon fiber, fiberglass is not a wonderful sonic material. Carbon fiber is a wonderful sonic material, and it's used on speakers, for example,
Right.
in stereo systems. And I've had bells made of carbon fiber, which makes the horn not only much lighter but very vibrant. It's very little, just a touch easier to play. But unfortunately, every tuba is a different size. If one were to invent a absolutely spectacular golf, a driver, let's say a one club, everybody in the world would be interested. If you create a carbon fiber bell like I use, well, there's probably 20,000 tuba players in the whole world. And of that, probably, by the time you get it down, and then there's so many different styles of tuba that one bell wouldn't fit, every instrument for sure. So it just, no one's picked up on manufacturing carbon fiber brass yet, but I'm sure it's around the corner.
Do you think in 50 years, people are going to be playing the same instruments, or is it going to be a more modern form? Is it all going to be electronic?
Yeah. Well, we worked with the Air Force Research Lab for a little while. The ones that were doing the space shuttle, they were doing all the composite material, like the tiles on the outside of the space shuttle. They were really curious about the carbon fiber instrument, and they tried to work out things with non-military, because if they can, for example, they came up with a carbon fiber cane, I believe, for people to use. They say the cost comes down for the government as they have other products, so they're willing to discuss and work on these things. So it turned out in the Air Force lab, all these scientists, 3/4 of them had played instruments in high school and college.
Wow.
So they're really, really curious. But one fellow said, we could save a lot of time for you. We could just put a patch on the side of your instrument and wire it in. We can make it sound like anything you want. So maybe, who knows where this is all going to come out.
Yeah. Wow.
With kick drums, it did this over 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. You can get a regular kick drum and you get this pad that you attach to it that's connected to a module to make it sound like the 808, the 909, the old school kick drums. Like what? You can get a piece of paper almost and get that same effect. So it's a purchasing aspect of it.
Right. And we know that the technology, again, one of my sons that does the electronic music, he's an electronic artist is now what they're called. He knows just enough piano to know just to wiggle the keys, but he can make a complete piano production on his computer just by moving. He works out the rhythm, gets a straight line of rhythm, and then he just moves those around to get the notes he wants, and he can create a piano thing. And drum sounds, he has a library of, you've probably seen this, Hiram, you have a library of 500, 600, 700 drum sounds.
Right.
So yeah, is the world progressing? Absolutely. And I think, again, this is where these, the young kids that grow up with electronics, they're really comfortable with these things. This is not unique to them. To me, it's a mystery and terribly unique. To them, it's like, well, this is normal.
Completely. The hardest thing about it is the fact that there are thousands of sounds. So in order for you to be cognizant of what you're going to play, you have to listen to all 1,000 sounds forever. So these cats get locked in the studio, and the guys that really know their instruments and know their sounds have put in the time. Big difference with the people that don't.
Right. Brandon is writing right now, I guess you call them covers. It's a cover of a Deadmau5 piece. Now, Deadmau5 is an artist that is Canadian. He was the first non-Canadian to fill our great big stadium down here that seats 30, 40,000 people. I think they actually created a Grammy category for electronic music because of Deadmau5, because of his popularity. So Brandon has taken one of his pieces and done a cover, redone it for brass, and it's actually quite remarkable. So we're expecting to twist Deadmau5's arm and see if he might collaborate on something like that, because it's a real blending of the two. Here we are, guys that studied our instruments, and a guy that has studied his. He's not a pianist or he wouldn't perform live that way. He's totally electronic, but so musical. Put those two together.
Yeah. So Hiram, we got just a couple of minutes left here. Do we have a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan? What's your vision for this? What would you like for this to do?
To be realistic, I'm working on right now, just trying to get through the year. There's so much going on to get the band off to a good start. And one of the issues is going to be me now rushing over to this rehearsal to say, I don't have the checks because they went to my studio house. And now we're going to have moans and groans. And I've got to run down UPS in St. Pete. And, it's just those things, just building the trust. And once you get the trust built and established, because we're new to them, they're new to us. And, with money, everybody gets a little weird. But other than that, we get through the year, then we start seeing some goals. And then we can start looking at a 5-year plan. I mean, I thought about 5 years, 10 years when we initially talked about putting it together. But in order for this to be realistic, it's almost like a day at a time, a week at a time, a month at a time, so on and so forth.
What's your instrumentation, Hiram? How deep are you getting into the band instruments?
Well, right now we have 3 trumpets, 2 trombones, sousaphone, tuba, field drummer, bass drummer, and a percussionist. She's basically the drum major. With the dancing, it's going to be such a different vibe. If you've seen that marching band, you know exactly. And then a tuba player, wow, how'd you move and play that? It takes time, man, just to isolate one movement, the shot.
Do you see this becoming like a 100-piece band, or are you trying to keep it chamber?
We were thinking of having more groups in different places.
Okay.
That was one of the plans that Alan mentioned. We can have this group in every city, you know. So we get this one going, and maybe we can inspire another city to do it all over the world, you know. But that is definitely something we're considering.
Nice. Great. It's amazing.
So Chuck, what are you going to do in the next? What's the Canadian Brass's vision for the next 5 years?
Well, I think similarly, we need to always grow. In a sense, the group could just play it out. Like we've got a reputation, we've got a repertoire, we've got an audience. We could all just, as they say, age out together. Or conversely, and this is where Brandon is really making his mark with the arrangements, is actually without alienating our present audience, bring things to the audience that also brings them along into a newer kind of culture. So on the one hand, it's like Tony Bennett had to keep singing his song. We have to keep playing our Bach and so forth. But along with that, we can really grow as well. So I think that's really the important thing for us is that there's always a growth pattern.
Beautiful. Well, so I want to thank you both for first of all for being a friend.
Hiram, was that you?
How do we cut this short? How do we get Alan to cut up? Oh my gosh. No, but I want to thank both of you for everything you've done for me as friends. But it's so wonderful to be able to introduce two friends who have never met each other, never talked to each other, and then in front of a small audience in a webinar, say hello and share a day and share some aspirations. And Chuck, you're a great role model as a band director and as a musician and as an educator, and Hiram, absolutely the same, living and breathing, helping others with music.
Well, I don't want to get too maudlin, Alan, but what you are doing and what you have done is really what makes this whole enterprise work. Musicians can get stuck in their room and close the door and you never see them. You're making it possible to bring this to the community and really enliven the society. It's a remarkable thing, and we musicians, we depend on that. I mean, that's really what makes the world go around. So we have a synergy for sure. Just want to thank you for everything you do.
Super. Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks so much. By the way, if anyone has any questions for Chuck or Hiram, you can email me at agassman@gassmanpa.com, and I will certainly pass it on. I hope everybody has a fantastic Sunday afternoon.
Great.
Hey.